Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Why don't you call the roll, Cassandra, please?
Courtney League as designee for Secretary Chaudhry.
Here.
Mr. Derenberg,
Here.
Vice Chair Eberhardt. Chuck Boyd as designee for Secretary Flora.
Here.
Mr. Gibbons is absent. Ms. Lala.
Here.
Krishna Talur as designee for Dr. Wright.
Here.
And Chair Casemeyer.
Here. Thank you.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any revisions to the agenda, Cassandra?
No, Mr. Chair.
We do have some public comment this morning. The climate parents of Prince George's County, Mr. Jakuda, representing them. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is going to speak to us. So whenever you're ready to go.
Sure. Thank you for hearing our comments this morning, Interagency Commission on School Construction. Our testimony today is concerning the need to adopt updated life cycle cost analysis documents as required by HB 458. About climate parents, we are a campaign to reduce climate change causing pollution in our schools, and our group is active in Prince George's County. In particular, we recently worked directly with PGCPS staff and elected officials and other advocates to develop a climate action plan for the school system. During the 2023 General Assembly session, the General Assembly passed HB 458, which was subsequently signed by Governor Moore. HB 458 was sponsored by Delegate Jazz Lewis. The bill dealt with several issues involving school construction, but with this letter or with this statement, we're concerned about a section that requires the Interagency Commission in coordination with DGS to adopt life cycle cost analysis standards. The effective date for this portion of the law is July of 2023. Life cycle analysis is an important requirement for many reasons when it comes to constructing long-term capital assets like schools. First, schools have long-term operations and maintenance costs that need to be adequately accounted for in planning, since upfront cost savings in construction may come at with higher long-term costs in increased operation and maintenance, and cost the taxpayer more greatly over time than would have otherwise occurred. Secondly, fossil fuel use in particular comes with negative impacts on student health and the climate, and these need to be factored into decisions about how to construct new schools. Thirdly, Maryland passed the Climate Solutions Now Act and set a deadline for our economy to be net zero by 2045, which is in line with the science. Equipment that otherwise has a physical life cycle of more than 20 years, such as a boiler, will no longer be able to be used for its entire useful life. At this point, we have not seen any publication of drafts for public comment or life cycle analysis standards that were adopted in coordination with DGS. We realize that you're likely working on this already, but it is important work that the LEAs need in order to ensure cost-effective and sustainable school construction. It's especially important since LEAs are now required to do the life cycle cost analysis themselves, and they need to have standards so they're not all doing it differently. We do urge the IAC to publish draft of its new life cycle analysis standards so that the public can comment on this vital work. When the standards are updated, it's important to include several factors related to climate planning beyond what is currently considered. Fossil fuel equipment should not be given a useful life that extends beyond 2045, since that is the date for which Maryland will be net zero under the Climate Solutions Now Act. The cost to retrofit buildings with EV charging before 2045 should be considered compared to the cost of making a building EV ready. Cost decisions must factor in any guaranteed refundable tax credits and state incentives that will offset the upfront cost of solar, heat pumps, energy efficiency, etc. Finally, cost savings from solar installation should be weighed in long-term operating costs. We appreciate your consideration of these comments. If you have any questions, my email is in the written comments I submitted along with this. We look forward to seeing the drafts of the life cycle cost analysis standards required to be completed under HB 458. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jakuda. Any questions for Mr. Jakuda? Comments? Well, we thank you again for taking the time to make a presentation before us. Have a good day.
Have a pleasant day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, Executive Director's Report. Alex?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to see you all today. First, today, with regard to the outcomes of the 2024 legislative session in relation to the IAC, Cassandra and Victoria will present a summary in item 10 towards the end of today's agenda. Second, as a preamble to the recommendations for the fiscal year 2025 CIP that staff are presenting to you today, I want to recognize the huge amount of work that your staff has put into this set of recommendations. They are the product of more than 6 months of in-depth, multi-step analysis by our planning group, our capital projects managers, and our funding programs group, who collectively went through more than 300 project requests. Because the IAC's mission is to support educational sufficiency and fiscal sustainability across the entire state, each request must be viewed not as a standalone request, but instead within the context of that LEA's portfolio and within the context of the statewide portfolio. This means that the analysis is complex and time-consuming. It's a privilege for me to lead such a hardworking staff who go the extra mile to give each of the 24 LEAs in the Maryland School for the Blind the maximum support possible within the IAC's adopted rules and the constraints of our limited available funding. This year's CIP shows that the statewide need for capital improvements is massive and is not abating. I've shared with you previously the results of our statewide assessment of the condition of school facilities, which finds that an average condition of about half depleted and an average age of square footage of 31 years. Essentially, every LEA has a significant backlog of deferred capital maintenance and capital renewal projects that has been growing steadily every year, and in some cases quite rapidly. To add to the pain, the costs of construction and other facilities management activities have increased much more than operating and capital budgets have at both the local and state levels. Since 2011, when the CIP was funded at $250 million, construction costs in Maryland have increased by 100%. But the CIP appropriation level has only increased by 26% since that time, and the addition in the meantime of auxiliary programs such as the Healthy School Facilities Fund and the time-limited Built to Learn program have not quite closed the gap. So the buying power of LEA's capital budgets versus the need has shrunk significantly. This year, Maryland's 24 school districts and the Maryland School for the Blind submitted requests totaling just over $1 billion in state support for the proposed projects. Although adjustments made since October have resulted in this total shrinking very slightly to $997 million, this request remains the largest on record. The funding that the IAC can deploy this year, including enrollment growth and relocatables funds and some prior year appropriations, is $363 million, enough to cover about 38% of the requests. In light of all this, the IAC's task in allocating the limited available state dollars against this huge need has become increasingly challenging. We must look deeply and carefully at every project request to ensure that every project the state participates in is supported to the extent of the demonstrated need and not beyond, and so that every state dollar allocated achieves the greatest possible improvement to the statewide portfolio. I believe that today's staff recommendations achieve the best balance and greatest value that's reasonably achievable given the information we have. And we're continually improving our processes, and we'll do even better next year and better the year after that. I thank you for your diligent review and consideration of these CIP recommendations, and I look forward with the rest of the staff to answering any questions you might have about the recommendations when we get to that agenda item. Finally, I'm very pleased to announce that last week, the Board of Public Works approved the IAC's task order to an IT contractor to configure a new GIS-based facilities data system, or FDS, that will house and support the management of the data from the IAC's statewide facilities assessment program and the maintenance effectiveness assessment program. This new system will be built on the ArcGIS platform and supported by the Maryland Department of Information Technology, so it will be state-of-the-art and built to evolve with the times. Once in operation, it will join with the IAC's existing facility inventory database and the new business management system to complete the three-part integrated master facilities asset library mandated by statute in 2018 as part of the modernization of the IAC. I and our staff look forward to giving you a look at the new system once it is ready for viewing. This concludes my ED's report for today, and I stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions for Alex? Okay. Alex, you want to go through the consent agenda or anything we need to talk about?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today's consent agenda is a standard one. No items of note to discuss.
Okay. Do I hear a motion that we approve the consent agenda? Mr. Darenberg, and second by Ms. Everhart. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, item 3, FY 2025 Capital Improvement Program, Arabia.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
Good morning.
It really is an exciting day. For fiscal year 2025, Governor Wes Moore and the Maryland General Assembly have appropriated a total of $313.8 million to the Capital Improvement Program, along with an additional $40 million in funds for the Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classroom Program, also known as EGRC. These funds, in conjunction with the available allocations held in the local education agency reserve fund accounts, are being recommended to assist school systems with early planning activities, such as the development of feasibility studies and educational specifications, design services activities, major construction activities, and the installation of new building systems required to keep school facilities operational. IAC staff coordinate monthly meetings with each local education agency to understand the programmatic needs, the county's preventive maintenance efforts, project scopes, and enrollments. If you would please turn to page 41, and I will walk you through the summary of project recommendations. Columns A through D include the LEA, total amount of funds requested, and the total number of planning and funding requests staff are recommending for approval. Given the state's future CIP funding projections and uncertainty on the amount of funding that will be appropriated through this program, we are recommending a lesser number of planning approvals this fiscal year. This is a significant point, and before I continue with my presentation, I'd like to give Executive Director Alex Donahue a moment to discuss the state's future obligations. Alex?
Thank you, Arabia. This year's CIP recommendations differ from those of most past years in that we are only able to recommend the approval of local planning for a handful of projects. As a reminder, local planning approval is a preliminary approval of state eligibility and support and is not a funding approval. Although local planning approval does not represent a guarantee of future state funding for a project at a specific time, it is an expression by the IAC that it does not see major obstacles to the proposed project potentially receiving funding in a future year. LP approval creates expectations of future funding in the next year or two, and LEAs and county governments often take into account the state's position on projects as they make local planning and funding decisions. But the IAC is not guaranteed any specific level of future appropriations, and transparency and good planning require that the IAC avoid cultivating expectations that it's not likely to be able to meet. In light of this, the IAC has for some time had a self-imposed limit of $500 million in future project funding liabilities, equal to about 1.5 to 2 years worth of average CIP appropriations. At the beginning of this year's CIP cycle, the future project funding liabilities associated with projects that the IAC has approved in previous years was already at $440 million. This is primarily a consequence of the extra large batch of projects funded in last year's windfall CIP year, as well as the significant number of BTL or Built to Learn projects approved over the past 2 years. It also is a consequence of the increasing cost of construction, which makes each project more expensive and reduces the number of projects that the IAC is able to fund in a given year. After subtracting the outlays taking place this year and adding the new design and construction allocations being recommended in this CIP, the future funding liabilities will total $506 million, which slightly overtops the IAC self-imposed cap of $500 million. This leaves the IAC unable to telegraph additional funding expectations in the form of more LP approvals this year. I want to emphasize here that I do not expect this to mean that the fiscal 26 CIP will be less favorable for LEA's coming requests for construction funding. It shouldn't be, unless we receive lower than expected levels of appropriations. I have not received indications that there are any plans to trim the IAC's funding levels next year. But in the meantime, IAC staff are working to communicate this reality to LEAs and county governments and to assist them in planning the needed projects with these factors in mind. Now I'll hand it back to Arabia to walk us through the CIP recommendations.
Thank you, Alex. Returning to the spreadsheet on page 41, column E and F represent the amount of new authorization the IAC approved at the 75% and 90% cycles. Column G provides a detailed accounting of the new authorization being recommended at the 100% round. The recommendation also includes the funds that staff are recommending be held in reserve for the Department of General Services consulting fees and the statewide reserved account for projects that come over budget or for out-of-cycle requests for design funding. Column H is the total amount of new authorization recommended to support projects reviewed by the staff of the IAC. The recommendations shown in columns I and J for prior year new authorization and prior year EGRC. As background, a county is eligible for EGRC funding when the enrollment growth is 100% above the 5-year statewide average, or 250 relocatable classrooms are in use based on a statewide average of 5 years. A total of $16.3 million in prior year EGRC remains available for future distribution to eligible projects in Howard County and $2.2 million for Montgomery County. The remaining prior year EGRC funds for Howard have not been recommended in this year's CIP because all of the funding requests have been recommended up to the allowable maximum state cost. And a sizable amount of the remaining funding being held for Montgomery County will be recommended to fully fund the county's request for agenda item number 6. Column K represents the funding recommended through the FY25 EGRC initiative. A total of $3.4 million is being held for Howard County. Alex is in communication with the county on how best to ensure that all available EGRC funds are utilized. The final column provides the total recommended allocations for distribution through the IAC's various funding sources. In conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the final FY 2025 CIP recommendations. Mr. Chair, I can read the motion if you would like.
Sure. Thank
The
you.
motion is to approve the fiscal year 2025 capital improvement program as presented in the total amount of $363.3 million, including $358.8 million for allocation to funding requests, $500,000 for the Department of General Services design consulting fees, and reserving $3.9 million in new authorization for design planning services and unanticipated project cost, and to authorize the IAC staff to make minor adjustments to allocations based on calculation of the project's maximum state allocation amount to avoid the over or underfunding of a project. I can now stand for questions.
Someone like to make that motion to that effect for purposes of discussion? Mr. Gibbons?
Move, Mr. Chair.
And second by Senator Law. Questions, discussion, comments? Everybody okay with this? Okay. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand and say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Arabia.
Thank
Nice
you.
job. Item number 4, FY 2023 and 2024 Capital Improvement Program Amendment Request, Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Lisa?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission.
The IAC has received a request from Anne Arundel County Public Schools for funding adjustments to 16 projects that were awarded funds through the FY 2023 and FY 2024 Capital Improvement Program. The adjustments are due to two factors. First, contract amounts coming in lower than anticipated, and second, the rounding of state participation amounts to the nearest $1,000 in the CIP publications. The list of projects this affects can be found on page 58 of your agenda. The adjustments total a remaining available balance of $1,283,113. AACPS would like to revert this balance to their reserve account. Contingent upon approval of this motion, application of these funds is included in the CIP approval item in today's agenda to the Glen Burnie High School Roof Replacement Phase 3 project. I will now read the motion. The motion is to approve Anne Arundel County Public Schools' request to amend the presented project allocations and revert unused FY 2023 and FY 2024 Capital Improvement Program funds totaling $1,283,113 to their reserve fund account. I can now stand for questions.
Thank you. Would someone make a motion to that effect? Mr. Gibbons, second by Mr. Lee. Questions for Lisa? Mr. Derenberg.
So do we know what Anne Arundel's secret is for having a surplus? Because everyone else, all the other ones were always voting to give them more money.
Anne Arundel County does use past cost information to establish their project estimates. And due to the ever-changing market conditions and just the complexity of the scopes and not truly knowing what the project's going to do until it's underway has led to some projects coming in under budget and some being over. Just so happens this is quite a list of projects that did come in under budget at this time.
Yeah, you did a good job, really.
You have a question, Mr. Gibbons?
Yeah, I guess this might be for Lisa or Alex. Are we seeing, we had that huge price spike there, after the pandemic. Are we seeing these prices come down a little bit? Are you seeing that across the board, or it's just kind of all over the place?
I believe it's all over the place. I think this is kind of a unique situation for Anne Arundel County. I do believe the market is still, construction costs are still pretty high in the market across the board.
Mr. Chair, I'll just add a quick note to Lisa's comment. Exactly right. I will say that the IAC staff right now are in the process of compiling the cost per square foot information from all the recent projects for our annual update of this official state cost per square foot, which will be coming to you in the upcoming meeting. And so we'll have a lot more detail, a lot more information to share on that specific topic very soon. But the nutshell is what we're seeing is a softening of the inflation or increase steepness. We're seeing things start to spread out. There are still, certain commodities and labor situations where there's still a lot of pressure. However, we're going to have some, I think, very useful information to discuss with you very soon.
Thank you, Alex.
You bet.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 5, FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program Amendment Request, Dorchester County Public Schools, Vienna Elementary School. Sean?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission.
Good morning.
The IAC has received a request from Dorchester County Public Schools to rescind $2,232,000 of fiscal year 2023 Capital Improvement Program funding for Vienna Elementary School HVAC project. The LEA has determined that the project will not be pursued due to the shifting of long-term priorities needed to support the implementation of requirements specified in the Blueprint for Education. The LEA has requested that a portion of the funds be reassigned to their fiscal year 2025 CIP to develop educational specification standards and perform elementary school feasibility studies to determine the best use of future funding. The CIP presented previously includes $282,250 allocated to support these projects. The remaining $1,000,000 $949,750 is requested to be transferred to the LEA's reserve account for future use. The IAC staff are in support of this request. I will now read the motion.
Okay,
The motion is to rescind the fiscal year 2023 Capital Improvement Program funding award to Dorchester County Public Schools Vienna Elementary School HVAC project totaling $2,232,000 and transfer the funding to the local education agency's reserve account for future use. I can now stand for questions.
thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect? Mr. Gibbons and Mr. League seconds. Any questions for Sean about this? All in favor, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Item 6, maximum state allocation and FY 2023 capital improvement program increase, Montgomery County Public Schools, Sligo Middle School. Melissa.
Good morning. MCPS received bids in early April for the HVAC replacement project of Sligo Creek Middle School. They were higher than anticipated, and they have consequently requested an increase in their maximum state allocation as a result. COMAR 14390207 states, the IAC may increase the maximum state construction allocation for a systemic renovation project when the LEA has sufficient reserve funds available, provided the LEA submits the final scope of work and a cost estimate or the bid tabulation for the project. MCPS is requesting that the maximum state allocation be amended from $4,500,000 to $6.18 million to match the increased project cost, and that the $1,680,000 be transferred from the LEA's reserve account to support this difference. The LEA has provided the required documentation, which has been reviewed by staff, and staff recommends approval of this request. Go ahead.
Read the motion, please.
To increase the maximum state allocation for Montgomery County Public Schools Sligo Middle School HVAC project from $4,500,000 to $6.18 million, and to transfer $1,860,000 from the LEA's reserved fund account to the FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program project in accordance with COMAR 14.39.02.07.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Someone like to make a motion to that effect so we can discuss it? Mr. Derenberg makes a motion. Mr. Gibbons seconds. Any discussion on this issue? Any questions? Mr. Gibbons.
Yeah, Melissa, is this increase a result of change of scope or just an increase in cost?
No, it's just increasing cost due to the timing of the project and the complexity of HVAC pricing right now.
So is it because of scarcity of HVAC units and all that kind of stuff?
It's all that kind of, yeah. It's the increasing cost plus the scarcity.
Yeah. We're seeing the same thing in our commercial business.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent with what we're seeing in other projects across the state too.
Yeah. Okay.
Scarcity. So just not enough's being made, or it's hard to get?
It's hard to get.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 7, Built to Learn funding request, Montgomery County Public Schools, Burtonsville Elementary School. Sharon?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Sharon Johnson. The Built to Learn Act of 2020, effective since February the 12th, 2021, highlights Maryland's commitment to enhancing the public education infrastructure. On a rolling basis, the Interagency Commission of School Construction oversees project eligibility and the approval of project submissions. The Act grants the Maryland Stadium Authority the ability to finance school construction projects through the issuance of revenue bonds, which operates within an estimate of $1.7 billion in total available funding for the program. Montgomery County Public Schools seeks funding under the program to replace Burtonsville Elementary School with a proposed budget of $29,907,000. for a new facility accommodating 762 students. This request aligns with the Act's objectives and funding parameters. IAC staff recommend approval of the LEA's request. I can now read the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
The motion is to approve Montgomery County Public Schools' request for Build to Learn construction funding for the Burtonsville Elementary School replacement project totaling in $29,907,000. The Capital Project Director, Melissa Wilfong, is available to respond to any project-specific related questions.
thank you. Do I hear a motion to that effect? Ms. Everhart and Mr. Derenberg seconds. Any questions on this project? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, item 8, Built to Learn funding request, Montgomery County Public Schools, Greencastle Elementary School. Sharon?
Montgomery County has requested Build to Learn program funding for the renovation and addition of Greencastle Elementary School with a maximum state allocation of $7,727,000. IAC staff recommend approval of the Montgomery County request. This project again aligns with the goal of the program. I can now read the motion, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
The motion is to approve Montgomery County request for Build to Learn construction funding for Greencastle Elementary School renovation and addition project totaling an amount of $7,727,000. Again, Ms. Melissa can stand for project-related questions.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion? Mr. Gibbons and Mr. League seconds. Any questions about this project? All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you.
Aye.
Item number 9, FY 2020 Healthy Schools Facility Fund Rescission Request, Calvert County Public Schools, Mount Harmony Elementary School Project, Boiler Project. Detarian?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Detarian Sims. Calvert County has requested IAC approval to rescind the funding awarded through the FY 2020 Healthy School Facility Fund to replace the boiler at Mount Harmony Elementary School. The request is being made due to local fiscal constraints. Because requests for funding through the HSFF are awarded to school construction projects on a competitive basis, the rescinded funds are required to be transferred to the statewide HSFF reserve account for future reallocation to other eligible projects. The motion is to rescind the $62,010 awarded through the FY 2020 Healthy School Facility Fund for Calvert County Public Schools, Mount Harmony Elementary School Boiler Replacement Project. Lisa Vaughn is available to respond to any project-specific related questions.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to that effect? Mr. Derenberg makes a motion. Mr. Boyd seconds. Questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye, raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 10, 2024 Legislative Session Summary. Cassandra and Victoria. Aye.
Good morning. Let me just get my presentation up. Can everyone see that all right?
Yes.
Great. Good morning. My name is Victoria Howard. Now that the legislative session has come to a close, I'll be presenting the enrolled bills which have an impact on the IAC. On each of the presented slides, I've tried to cover both the bill generally as well as the impact to the IAC specifically. We'll start with HB 1390. HB 1390 was a significant bill that had a lot of components. It removed the sunset date from the school safety grant program, allowing it to continue for the foreseeable future, meaning that the IAC will continue to administer the program longer than initially anticipated. The bill also increased the state cost share to 100% for major renovation projects that have a state cost share of less than 55%, have full-time enrollment of less than 60,000 in September of 2023, and have planning and design occurring for the project in either fiscal year 2025 or fiscal year 2026. From a preliminary analysis, it appears that this provision could impact up to 4 high schools in the state. The impacts to the IAC as a result of this bill include continued administration of the School Safety Grant Program, which our agency administers in partnership with the Maryland Center for School Safety. Additionally, IAC staff will be required to amend COMAR language, which describes when a project can receive a 100% state share. As a result of bill language, the IAC will also be required to develop a report to the General Assembly regarding the eligibility of schools to apply for funding for artificial-based weapons detection systems. The bill also reestablishes the work group on the assessment and funding of school facilities, with the work group to begin meeting again after June 1st, 2025. Per this bill, the IAC chair will be required to be a member of this work group. There are also a few additional components to the bill, such as some minor changes made to the P3 program in Prince George's County, and clarifying the annual goal of $450 million does not include funding allocated under the Built to Learn program. The bill also delays the implementation of the Nancy K. Kopp Public School Facilities Priority Fund from using the results of the statewide facilities assessment by 1 year to fiscal year 2028, but permits the IAC to use priority fund money in fiscal year 2027 to fund projects similar to those currently eligible under the Healthy Schools Facility Fund. Next is HB 472. House Bill 472 establishes the School Mapping Data Program, which permits schools to utilize funds from the Safe Schools Fund to pay for the mapping of school buildings. While the Safe Schools Fund is an MCSS managed funding program, since the IAC is the agency most familiar with the layout and construction of school facilities, the IAC is the agency that is responsible for developing mapping standards that schools must adhere to. To develop these standards and comply with the requirements of digital compatibility and labeling, the IAC will work with MCSS and other appropriate partners. Lastly, there were 4 county-specific bills that either impacted the IAC or its commission members or dealt directly with the work of the IAC. Both House Bill 1440 and 1450 are Howard County-specific bills that deal with the county budget of schools and school facilities and the funding of schools and school facilities. Senate Bill 114 is a Calvert County-specific bill that creates a work group to study the viability of public-private partnerships, P3s, in Calvert County. The bill also requires the chair of the IAC or the chair's designee to serve on the Calvert County P3 work group. House Bill 1016 establishes a work group as well, this time for Frederick County, specifically to study school construction planning. One member of the IAC is required to serve on this work group, but it is not specified that it must be the chair. These are all the bills that most directly impact the IAC. If you have any questions about these bills, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Cassandra to discuss the capital and operating budget bills.
Thank you, Victoria.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and especially to speak to you when session is over. I do want to note that Victoria is our policy analyst. She joined us just in time for session to start a little over 6 months ago, and she just did a really stellar job this session helping to keep us all on track. So I want to give her some kudos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next slide. You'll see that the FY25 IAC budget was pretty much as expected. I do want to note that the budget bills haven't been signed yet, but assuming that they pass as they were enrolled, we received $6.1 million for the Aging Schools program. You, of course, know already that we received approximately $313.9 million plus $40 million of EGRC for the CIP, which you just approved in item 3 of the agenda. We also received $3.5 million for the non-public Aging Schools program, which is the same amount that we receive pretty much every year. One item of significance is that the Budget Reconciliation and Finance Act, or BRFA, repealed the School Construction Revolving Loan Fund, which was originally enacted but not funded in 2018, House Bill 1783, and which received a total of $40 million in subsequent fiscal years. The IAC had not yet established the revolving loan fund program, which was intended to forward fund a local share of school construction costs for LEAs with low or no interest loans. During the session, the BRFA repealed the fund and transferred the $40 million that was in the fund to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund. Moving on to the next slide, you see our operating budget. We did receive 2 additional full-time permanent PINs in FY25 and funding for 1 contractual PIN. In total, we received an operating budget allocation of $7.3 million, which includes $5.8 million for salaries, wages, and fringe benefits. The operating budget also includes $10 million for the School Safety Grant Program that isn't reflected on this slide since it's programmatic. There was also an FY24 deficiency appropriation for $878,000 for the IAC to fund the procurement of a facilities data system. That's the same system that Alex talked about us kicking off earlier. It's a cornerstone of the statutorily required integrated master facility asset library, which we're calling the INFL because we love our acronyms in state government. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, Cassandra and Victoria. Any questions about legislative action regarding the IAC? I can't hear or see anyone. Okay, thank you, ladies, for filling us in. We appreciate it. For our next agenda item, the commission expects to receive legal advice from our counsel pursuant to section 3-305B7 of the general provisions article of the annotated code of Maryland. I will ask for a motion to close this meeting. Do I have a motion to close the meeting? Mr. Derenberg? Your second, Ms. Everhart. All in favor of the motion? Raise your hand or say aye. Okay. The motion carries. The board will adjourn the meeting from this closed session. Thank you.